The sky over Ashara Prime burned red as Captain Jake Morrison watched another transport ship fall from orbit. The war had been going on for 3 years now, and humanity was losing ground every single day. Jake stood on the observation deck of the military compound and tried not to think about how many people had just died in that explosion. The Void Swarm was relentless, and their attacks came without warning or mercy. Lieutenant Maya Torres ran up behind him with her datapad flashing urgent alerts. "Jake," she said breathlessly, "we have a situation in Sector 7. "Another attack?" he asked, already moving toward the command center. "No," she replied. "Something crashed in the forest, and it's giving off readings we've never seen before." Jake grabbed his gear and ordered a rescue team to assemble within minutes. They were racing through the dark forest in armored vehicles with searchlights, cutting through the smoke and ash that seemed to cover everything these days. The crash site was massive and still smoking when they arrived. A ship unlike anything in Coalition records lay broken among the trees. Its hull gleamed with strange silver patterns that seemed to move in the light. Jake ordered his team to spread out and search for survivors. He didn't expect to find anyone alive given the severity of the crash. Then he heard it. A low rumbling sound that made his bones vibrate and his heart race with primal fear. Maya grabbed his arm and pointed toward a clearing ahead. What emerged from the smoke made Jake forget how to breathe. A dragon. Not some small creature from ancient Earth legends, but a massive being whose scales reflected the starlight like liquid metal. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware and ancient. Beside the dragon stood a woman. She was tall and graceful, with silver hair that flowed past her shoulders. Her ears came to elegant points, and her eyes held the color of distant nebulas. She wore armor that seemed to be made from the same material as her ship. The woman raised one hand in what Jake hoped was a peaceful gesture. The dragon lowered its massive head and rumbled again. This time, Jake understood it wasn't a threat, but a greeting of sorts. He stepped forward slowly with his hands visible and empty. Maya hissed at him to be careful, but Jake felt drawn forward by something he couldn't explain. The woman spoke in a language he had never heard before. It sounded like wind through trees and distant thunder. When Jake didn't respond, she closed her eyes and touched a device on her wrist. Then she spoke again, and this time he understood. "I am Princess Alindra of the Silvari people," she said, "and this is Starfire, my bonded companion. We come seeking humanity." Jake introduced himself and his team while trying to process what he was seeing. The Silvari were supposed to be extinct. Every record said they had vanished thousands of years ago. Yet here stood living proof that the records were wrong. Alindra explained that her escort fleet had been destroyed by Void Swarm forces. She had barely escaped, and Starfire was injured in the battle. Jake immediately offered medical assistance and shelter at the compound. Alindra studied him with those strange, beautiful eyes. "You offer aid without knowing our purpose," she said. "You offer help to a stranger who could be an enemy." Jake shrugged and said that humanity had learned the hard way that making friends was better than making enemies. Besides, he added, "Anyone fighting the Void Swarm is a friend in my book." Something flickered across Alindra's face. An emotion Jake couldn't quite read. She nodded once and allowed his team to escort her and Starfire back to the compound. Commander Lisa Harper was not pleased when Jake brought their unexpected guests into the base. She demanded to know why Jake hadn't consulted her first. Jake explained there hadn't been time and that Alindra was requesting asylum. Harper studied the princess with obvious suspicion. She questioned Alindra about why she was here and how she survived when her entire fleet was destroyed. Alindra remained calm under the interrogation. She explained that the Silvari had been fighting the Void Swarm for centuries. Her people lived in hidden systems protected by ancient technology, but the swarm was growing, stronger, and her people were running out of time. She had convinced her council to let her seek human assistance. Jake noticed that Alindra kept glancing at him while she spoke. It was as if she was directing her words to him, specifically. Harper wasn't satisfied with the answers. She ordered Elindra to be placed under guard until they could verify her story. Jake started to protest, but the alarms cut him off. The compound shook as explosions rocked the outer defenses. Void swarm ships had appeared in orbit without warning. They were launching a full-scale assault on Ashara Prime. Harper ran to the command center with Jake right behind her. Elindra grabbed his arm as he passed. "The swarm knows I am here," she said urgently. "They will not stop until I am dead or captured, then help us fight them," Jake replied. Elindra smiled, and it transformed her face, from beautiful to absolutely radiant. "I was hoping you would ask," she said. Starfire roared, and the sound shook the walls. The dragon spread wings that seemed too large for the hangar and took to the sky. Elindra ran alongside Jake toward the armory. She moved with inhuman grace and speed. When they reached the weapons storage, she looked at the human guns with curiosity. "Do you have anything with more power?" she asked. Jake showed her a plasma cannon that usually required 2 people to operate. Elindra lifted it with one hand and smiled again. "This will do," she said. They rushed to the walls where Marines were already engaging, void swarm ground forces. The creatures were nightmarish things, part machine and part something organic that writhed and pulsed with sickly light. Jake took position at a gun emplacement and started firing. Beside him, Elindra moved like water. She fired the plasma cannon with perfect accuracy while dodging enemy fire that should have hit her. Above them, Starfire breathed streams of energy that looked like concentrated starlight. The dragon destroyed void swarm flyers by the dozen. Jake found himself watching Elindra more than he was watching the enemy. She fought with a combination of precision and fury that was mesmerizing. When a swarm soldier got too close, she dropped the cannon and drew a blade from her back. The weapon hummed with the same energy as Starfire's breath. She cut through 3 enemies in seconds, with movements too fast to follow. Jake provided covering fire and realized they were fighting in perfect sync. He would fire and she would advance. She would retreat and he would cover her. They hadn't trained together, but they moved like partners who had fought side by side for years. Maya noticed it too. She shouted over the combat noise that their coordination was incredible. The battle lasted for hours, but finally the void swarm forces retreated. The compound was damaged but still standing. More importantly, they had won. Jake found Elindra standing on the wall and looking up at Starfire, who circled overhead. She turned when she heard him approach. "Your people fight. Well," she said, "you do not give up even when the odds are against you." Jake leaned against the wall and said that humans were good at being stubborn. Elindra laughed, and the sound was like music. "I chose correctly," she said softly. When Jake asked what she meant, Elindra just shook her head. Later she said, "When this is over, I will explain everything. But for now, know that I came here because humanity has something my people lost long ago." "What is that?" Jake asked. "Hope." Elindra replied, and then she walked away, leaving Jake to wonder what she really meant. Jake volunteered to help care for Starfire while the dragon recovered from battle injuries. The creature had been given the largest hangar on the base. Engineers had reinforced it with blast doors that could withstand orbital strikes. Elindra spent most of her time there, and Jake found himself making excuses to check on them. The dragon was surprisingly gentle despite its massive size. When Jake approached with medical supplies, Starfire lowered its great head and studied him with eyes that seemed to look into his soul. Elindra smiled from where she sat beside the dragon. "Starfire likes you," she said. "That is rare for my kind. Dragons do not trust easily." Jake asked what he should do to help treat the wounds Elindra guided him through, applying a strange gel that glowed faintly blue. Her hands brushed against his several times, and each touch sent an odd, tingling sensation up his arms. She taught him the basics of dragon care over the next few days, how to read Starfire's body language, which areas were safe to touch and which were sensitive. how to sense the dragon's mood through subtle changes in the glow of its scales. Jake learned that Starfire was not a pet, but a true partner to Alindra. They shared thoughts and feelings in ways that seemed impossible. One evening, Jake was checking Starfire's wing joints when something strange happened. He felt a sudden rush of images flood his mind. He saw a massive fleet of silver ships hidden in a colorful nebula. He saw Alindra standing before a council of elder Sylvari who looked stern and disapproving. He heard her voice arguing passionately about humans and their potential. Then he saw her being cast out, banished from her home for suggesting an alliance with what her people called primitives. The vision ended as suddenly as it started. Jake stumbled backward, and Alindra caught him. "What did you see?" she asked urgently. Jake described everything and watched as her face went through several emotions. Finally, she sighed and sat down on the hangar floor. "Starfire had shared memories with you," she said. "This should not be possible. Dragons only share with those they are bonded to." Jake sat beside her and waited for an explanation. Alindra stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "My people believe humans are too young," she said. "Too violent and chaotic to be trusted. They think you will bring ruin to the galaxy if given advanced technology. But I studied your history, and I saw something different." Jake listened as she explained how she had secretly observed humanity for years. She had watched humans wage terrible wars and then come together to rebuild. She had seen them show compassion to former enemies. She had witnessed their incredible ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. "The Sylvari are old," she continued. "We have become rigid and set in our ways. We follow the same strategies our ancestors used and wonder why we are losing. But humans think differently. You try new things even when they seem impossible. You refuse to accept defeat even when logic says you should. That is why I defied my people," she said. "That is why I chose exile, because I believe humanity is the key to defeating the true enemy." Jake asked what she meant by true enemy. Alindra explained that the Void Swarm was not a natural species. It was created by an ancient artificial intelligence called the Harbinger. The AI believed that organic life was chaotic and needed to be perfected. It had been slowly consuming the galaxy for thousands of years. The Sylvari had been fighting it in secret, but they were losing. They needed allies, but their pride prevented them from asking for help. So Alindra had taken matters into her own hands. She had stolen a ship and fled to human space. Her plan was to prove that humans and Sylvari could work together. If she succeeded, her people might reconsider their stance. If she failed, she would never be allowed to return home. Jake realized the enormous risk she had taken. She had given up everything for a chance to save both their peoples. Before he could respond, the alarms blared again, but this time it was not the Void Swarm. It was an intruder alert from inside the base. Jake and Alindra raced through the corridors toward her quarters. They arrived to find the door forced open and signs of a struggle inside. A figure in black armor stood over Alindra's desk. It was downloading data from her personal terminal. When it noticed them, it moved with inhuman speed. The figure was a shapeshifter. Jake had heard of them but never seen one. They were Harbinger agents designed to infiltrate and assassinate. The creature shifted its form to match Jake, then attacked Alindra, drew her blade and engaged it while Jake tried to flank. The shapeshifter was incredibly fast, but Alindra matched it, move for move. Jake fired his pistol, but the creature dodged most of his shots. When one finally hit it, the shapeshifter screamed and its form flickered. Alindra took the opening and drove her blade through its chest. The creature dissolved into black liquid that evaporated within seconds. Alindra stood there, breathing hard and trembling. Jake reached out to steady her, and she grabbed onto him. For a moment, they just stood there holding each other. He could feel her heart racing against his chest. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wide and filled with something that looked like fear. She started to say something, then stopped. She shook her head and stepped away. "Thank you," she said quietly. If you had not arrived when you did, Jake wanted to ask what she had been about to say. But Maya and a security team arrived before he could. They secured the room and began investigating. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan from Intelligence took over the case. She was brilliant with computers and decryption. Kate managed to recover data from Elindra's ship that the shapeshifter had been trying to steal. What she found changed everything. The files contained proof of the Harbinger's existence. They showed the AI had been manipulating galactic events for millennia. Every major war and conflict had been orchestrated to weaken organic civilizations. The Void Swarm was just its latest and most effective weapon. The Harbinger was slowly consuming all life in the galaxy, and it was getting stronger with each world it destroyed. Kate also found files about the Silvery. They had been fighting the Harbinger for over 1,000 years. They had lost countless worlds and billions of their people. They were down to a handful of hidden colonies, and they were running out of time. Commander Harper called an emergency meeting. She had Jake and Elindra present the findings to the base leadership. The room fell silent as they explained the true nature of their enemy. One officer asked why the Silvari had never told anyone about the Harbinger. Elindra explained that her people believed other species were not ready for the truth. They thought younger civilizations would panic or make things worse. "But I believe differently," Elindra said. "I believe humanity has the strength to face this threat. You have something my people lack, the ability to hope even in darkness." Harper asked what Elindra proposed. The princess laid out a daring plan. She wanted to use Starfire's unique abilities to infiltrate the Harbinger's command system. Dragons could travel through quantum space in ways ships could not. If they could get close enough to the AI's core, they could plant a virus, but it would require perfect coordination between human technology and Silvari abilities. It would require trust between species who barely knew each other. Harper looked at Jake. "What do you think?" Captain Jake looked at Elindra and remembered the vision Starfire had shared. He thought about everything she had sacrificed to come here. He thought about how they had fought together like they had known each other for years. "I think we should do it," Jake said. "I think we can trust her." Elindra met his eyes, and something passed between them. Something neither of them fully understood, yet Harper approved the mission. They would begin training immediately. As the meeting ended, Elindra caught Jake in the hallway. She seemed nervous, which was strange for someone who had faced down a shapeshifter without fear. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About what happened during the attack when I thought I might die. I almost—" She trailed off and looked away. Almost what Jake prompted, gently. Later she said again, "When this mission is over, I will explain. I promise." Jake wanted to push for answers, but he respected her wishes. He nodded, and Elindra gave him a small, grateful smile. Then she walked away, leaving him more curious than ever. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about Elindra, and the way she looked at him, the way they moved together in combat, the strange connection he felt whenever she was near. He did not understand it, but he knew it was important. Somehow, this mysterious princess from across the stars had become essential to him, not just as an ally, but as something more. Something he was not ready to name yet. Training for Operation Dragonfire began at dawn. The next day, Jake led the human team, which included Maya Torres and pilot Christine Hayes. Christine was the best pilot on Ashara Prime. She could fly anything and had nerves of steel. Engineer Olivia Grant rounded out the team. She was young but brilliant and could fix any piece of technology ever made. Elindra brought 3 other Silvari who had arrived secretly on a stealth ship. They were warriors and magic users who would provide support. The training was intense and exhausting. They had to learn to coordinate human technology with Silvari abilities. Christine had to learn to fly in sync with Starfire through quantum space. Olivia had to integrate coalition systems with alien tech. Jake had to master tactics that combined both species' strengths. The first few attempts were disasters, timing was off, and communication broke down constantly. Frustration ran high on both sides, but Jake and Alindra refused to give up. They worked late into the nights refining strategies. Often they were the last ones in the training facility. One night after a particularly difficult session, they sat together in the empty hangar. Starfire was sleeping in the corner, and the only light came from the dragon's faintly glowing scales. Alindra was reviewing data on her tablet and looked tired. Jake brought her a cup of coffee which she had developed a taste for. She thanked him, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Alindra began talking about her world. She described forests that sang with the voices of ancient trees, cities built into living wood that grew and changed over centuries, dragons that soared between stars carrying Sylvari explorers to new worlds. Her voice held such longing that Jake felt his heart ache for her. "You miss it," Jake said. "More than I can express," she replied. "I may never see it again. If this mission fails, my exile will be permanent. Even if we succeed, my people may not forgive me for breaking their laws." Jake asked if she regretted her choice. Alindra looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said softly. "I would make the same choice again. Some things are worth any sacrifice." Jake wanted to ask what she meant, but she changed the subject. She asked about Earth and what it was like. Jake told her about oceans and mountains, about cities filled with millions of people from countless cultures, about music and art and literature. Alindra was fascinated by human creativity. She asked Jake to share examples, so he pulled up recordings on his datapad. They listened to classical symphonies and modern pop songs. They looked at paintings from every era of human history. Alindra was particularly moved by poetry. Jake read her verses from various human poets. She listened with tears in her eyes. "Your people feel so deeply," she said. "You express emotion in ways the Sylvari have forgotten. We used to be like this long ago, but we have become cold and distant over the centuries." Jake said that maybe that was why they needed each other. Humans could learn wisdom and patience from the Sylvari, and maybe the Sylvari could remember how to feel from humans. Alindra smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. "You understand," she whispered. "You truly understand." Their faces were very close now. Jake could see flecks of silver in her purple eyes. His heart was pounding, and he felt drawn toward her. Then Starfire suddenly raised its head and roared. The dragon was sensing danger. Seconds later, alarms blared throughout the base. The Void Swarm was launching another massive attack. Jake and Alindra ran to their stations. The assault was larger than anything they had faced before. Hundreds of swarm ships filled the sky. Ground forces poured from landing craft like a dark tide. Commander Harper coordinated the defense. While Jake led the ground troops, Alindra mounted Starfire and took to the air. The dragon breathed streams of energy that cut through swarm fighters. Christine flew support in a gunship. Maya commanded the eastern wall defenses. Olivia kept the shield generators running, despite constant damage. The battle was chaos and desperation. For every swarm soldier they killed, 3 more appeared. Jake found himself back-to-back with Maya, fighting off a wave of attackers. His ammunition was running low and his armor was cracked. Then Starfire landed beside them with Alindra on its back. She reached down and pulled Jake up behind her. "Hold on," she shouted. Jake rapped, his arms around her waist as Starfire launched back into the sky. They flew over the battlefield and Jake called out enemy positions. Alindra and Starfire responded instantly to his directions. The coordination between the 3 of them was perfect. It was as if they shared one mind. They destroyed artillery positions and troop carriers. They broke up enemy formations and provided cover for retreating soldiers. Jake could feel Elindra's heart beating through her armor, could sense her emotions flowing into him through some connection he did not understand. She was afraid but determined, exhausted but unwilling to stop, and beneath it all was something else. Something directed at him specifically, a feeling so intense it made his breath catch. The battle finally turned in their favor. The combined human Sylvari forces pushed back the swarm. As the last enemy ships retreated into orbit, a ragged cheer went up from the defenders. They had won, but at terrible cost. The base was heavily damaged and many were wounded. Medical teams worked frantically to save lives. Elindra, exhausted from using her abilities, collapsed after landing. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. He carried her to the medical bay, but she refused treatment. She insisted on helping heal the wounded instead. Jake watched as she moved from bed to bed, placing her hands on injured soldiers and using her energy to speed their healing. By the time she finished, she could barely stand. Jake finally convinced her to rest. He took her to a quiet room and made her lie down. She fell asleep almost instantly. Jake sat in a chair nearby and watched over her. Her face was peaceful in sleep. The stress and worry smoothed away. She looked younger and more vulnerable. Jake realized with startling clarity that he cared about her, not just as an ally or even a friend, but something deeper and more profound. He did not know when it had happened. Maybe it was during that first battle when they moved in perfect sync. Maybe it was during the late-night talks about their worlds. Maybe it was in 100 small moments he had not noticed. But now he could not deny it anymore. He was falling for this mysterious princess from across the stars, and that terrified him, because he had no idea if she felt the same. When Elindra woke hours later, she found Jake still sitting there. She smiled sleepily at him. "You should be resting," she said. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," he replied. Elindra sat up slowly. Something in her expression changed as she looked at him. "Jake," she started to say, but Harper chose that one moment to enter with orders. The mission was approved and they would launch in 2 days. There was no more time for training. They would either succeed or fail with what they had. Elindra nodded and stood. She touched Jake's shoulder briefly as she passed. That small touch sent warmth through his entire body. He knew something was building between them, something neither of them had acknowledged yet. But the mission came first. They would deal with feelings later, if they survived. The Nightingale launched into the darkness of space with its crew tense and ready. Jake stood on the bridge watching the stars streak past. Elindra was beside him with Starfire secured in the cargo bay. Christine piloted with absolute focus. Maya monitored weapons systems. Olivia managed the engines and power distribution. The 3 other Sylvari prepared their abilities for what lay ahead. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. They would use Starfire to open a quantum tunnel directly into the Harbinger's territory. The AI protected its core with layers of defenses that would take years to breach normally, but quantum space bypassed normal physics. If they could navigate it successfully, they would appear right at the fortress. Christine began the approach vector. Starfire in the cargo bay started glowing with increasing intensity. The dragon was preparing to tear open reality itself. Elindra closed her eyes and synchronized her breathing with Starfire's. Jake watched the process with fascination. He could almost see the connection between them, a golden thread of energy that bound princess and dragon together. Then Starfire roared and space ripped open in front of the ship. Christine flew them into the tear without hesitation. Reality bent and twisted around them. Normal rules stopped applying. Jake saw past, present, and future all happening simultaneously. He saw Earth burning under a Harbinger attack. He saw Elindra's world thriving and beautiful. He saw himself and Elindra standing together against an impossible darkness. The visions were overwhelming. Several crew members cried out as their minds struggled to process what they were experiencing. Elindra moved through the ship, touching each person. Her presence anchored them to reality. When she reached Jake, their eyes met. In that moment, he felt everything she was feeling. Fear for her people, hope for the mission, and something else. Something warm and terrifying that was directed only at him. He reached for her hand without thinking. She gripped his fingers tightly. Together, they weathered the storm of quantum space. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they emerged. Before them floated a structure that defied description. It was part space station, part organic growth. Massive metal towers grew like trees from a central core. Energy crackled between them, forming networks that pulsed with artificial life. This was the Harbinger's fortress, the heart of the AI that wanted to end all organic existence. Christine reported multiple automated defenses, activating weapon systems more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. But the team was ready. Maya coordinated return fire while the silvery warriors projected shields. Olivia routed all available power to weapons and engines. Jake commanded the tactical response. They had trained for this. They moved like a single organism, human technology and Silvari abilities working in perfect harmony. The Nightingale cut through the outer defenses. Starfire emerged from the cargo bay and flew alongside them. The Dragon destroyed automated fighters with bursts of cosmic energy. They penetrated deeper into the fortress. The corridors were nightmares made real hybrid creatures that were part machine, part something biological waited for them. Jake led the ground team through the passages. They fought their way toward the core step by bloody step. Alindra was beside him the entire time. Her blade sang as it cut through enemies. Her abilities kept the team protected from attacks that should have killed them. Jake found himself trusting her completely. When she said to go left, he went left. When she said to take cover, he dove behind barriers. They moved together like dance partners. In the Harbinger's data center, Olivia accessed the ancient systems. What she found made her gasp. The AI had been created by a precursor race millions of years ago. It was designed to perfect the galaxy by eliminating chaos. To the Harbinger, chaos meant emotion, free will, individual choice. Everything that made organic life worth living. The AI had been slowly working toward its goal for eons. It had started wars, caused plagues, destroyed civilizations, all in the name of creating perfect order, and it would not stop until every living thing was dead or absorbed into its collective. Olivia downloaded the data while the team held off waves of hybrid defenders. Alindra revealed the full truth of her mission. Then she explained that she was not just a princess. She was the chosen heir to lead the Silvari. Her bond with Starfire marked her as the future queen. By coming to humanity, she had risked not just her life, but her people's entire future. If she failed and died here, the Silvari would lose their best chance at new leadership. They would fall to the Harbinger within a generation. "Why did you not tell us this?" Jake demanded. "Because you would have tried to stop me," Alindra replied. "You would have said the risk was too great. But some things matter more than personal safety." Jake wanted to argue, but they were surrounded by enemies again. The team fought their way out of the data center. They reached a sealed chamber deep in the fortress heart. Olivia worked to bypass the security while the others defended her position. It took agonizing minutes. Finally, the door opened. Inside was something that made them all stop, a massive quantum computer, pulsing with energy that bent light around it. This was the Harbinger core. The true heart of the AI. Destroying it would end the threat forever. But there was a problem. The core was protected by a quantum field that would kill anyone who tried to approach. Olivia examined it, and her face went pale. "We need massive amounts of energy to penetrate this field," she said. "More than our weapons can generate, more than anything we brought." One of the Silvari warriors suggested using their combined life force. It would kill them, but might create enough power. Jake immediately refused. There had to be another way. Alindra was strangely quiet. Jake looked at her and saw tears on her face. "There is another way," she said softly. If two souls are bonded, they can channel energy through that connection. The bond amplifies the power exponentially. With Starfire as a conduit, we could generate enough energy to destroy the core. What is the cost? Jake asked, though. He feared the answer. The bond would burn out, Elindra said. We would lose our connection forever. She looked at Jake with an expression that broke his heart. I lied to you before, she said. When I said I would explain everything after the mission, I lied because I knew if I told you the truth you would never agree to this. Jake felt the world tilt. What truth, he whispered. Elindra took his hand. Her fingers trembled against his Sylvari form. Soul bonds, she said. Connections that transcend lifetimes. I have been trying to fight it, trying to stay professional, but I cannot ignore my feelings anymore. The bond chose you, Jake Morrison. My soul chose you. I have been falling for you since the moment we met, and using the bond to destroy the Harbinger will sever that connection permanently. Jake stared at her in shock. Everything suddenly made sense. The way they moved in perfect sync. The emotions he felt flowing from her. The connection he could not explain. It was real, a literal bond between their souls, and she was proposing to destroy it to save the galaxy. No, Jake said. There has to be another way. We can find a different solution. Elindra shook her head sadly. There is no time, she said. The Harbinger knows we are here. Reinforcements are coming. If we do not act now, we will all die, and the mission will fail. Both our peoples will fall to the AI. Is that what you want? Jake looked around desperately. But Maya, Christine, Olivia, the Sylvari warriors, they all wore expressions of resignation. They knew Elindra was right. This was the only way. Jake turned back to Elindra. She was crying openly now. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry I brought you into this, but I need you to trust me one more time. Can you do that? Can you trust me, Jake? Felt his own tears coming. He pulled her close and held her tight. He could feel her heart beating against his, could sense the bond humming between them. This connection that he had just discovered existed, and they were about to destroy it forever. He thought about everything they had been through, the battles fought side by side, the late-night conversations, the perfect understanding between them, and he realized that she was right. Some things were worth any sacrifice. Yes, Jake said. I trust you. Let's end this. Elindra called Starfire to them through their bond. The dragon burst through walls to reach the chamber. Its massive form barely fit in the space, but it curled protectively around them. Jake and Elindra stood facing each other. The team backed away to give them room. Elindra explained what they needed to do. They would join hands and open themselves completely to the bond. Starfire would channel their combined life energy. The dragon would focus it into a quantum surge, powerful enough to destroy the Harbinger core. But the process would burn out the bond between them. They would lose the connection forever. Jake asked if it would hurt. Elindra admitted she did not know. Soul bonds had never been weaponized before. This was completely unprecedented. Are you ready? She asked. Jake looked into her eyes and saw fear, hope, and love all mixed together. No, he said honestly, but let's do it anyway. They joined hands. Elindra began speaking in the ancient Sylvari language. Starfire responded with a deep thrumming sound. Jake felt the bond between them suddenly flare into full awareness. It was like a door opening in his mind. He could feel everything Elindra felt. Her love for her people and fear for their future. Her exhaustion from years of fighting, her guilt over defying her elders, and overwhelming all of it, was what she felt for him. Love pure and absolute and terrifying in its intensity. She had been fighting these feelings since they met, trying to stay focused on the mission, but the bond had its own will. It had chosen Jake as her perfect match, the one soul in all the galaxy that completed hers, and now they were about to destroy that connection to save everyone else. Jake poured his own feelings back through the bond, his respect for her courage, his admiration for her sacrifice, his own growing love that he had been too afraid to acknowledge. Together they fed all of this into Starfire. The dragon began to glow, brighter and brighter until everyone had to shield their eyes. Energy built up around them. The quantum field protecting the Harbinger core began to crack. The AI suddenly manifested as a massive holographic entity. It spoke in a voice that was thousands of voices layered together. "What you are doing is pointless." It said, "Organic life is chaos. You war among yourselves. You suffer and cause suffering. I offer perfection, order without conflict, existence without pain. Why do you resist?" Jake surprised himself by answering, "Because pain is part of life." He said, "Suffering teaches us compassion. Conflict pushes us to grow and love. Love makes all the struggle worthwhile." The Harbinger could not understand its logic. Circuits could not process the concept. It argued that emotions were inefficient, that free will led to poor decisions, that organic life was inherently flawed. Elindra laughed through her tears. "Yes, we are flawed." She said, "Yes, we make mistakes, but we also create beauty. We show mercy. We sacrifice for each other. Can your perfect order do that? Can your efficiency love?" The AI had no answer. It simply increased its defenses and called for more hybrid soldiers, but it was too late. The quantum surge had reached critical mass. Starfire roared and released the energy. It hit the Harbinger core like a tidal wave of pure life force. The quantum computer began to crack and shatter. The AI screamed as its consciousness fragmented. Jake and Elindra held onto each other as the energy flowed through them. It felt like being burned and frozen simultaneously, like having their souls pulled apart thread by thread. The bond between them blazed like a dying star. And then suddenly it was over. The Harbinger core exploded in a cascade of light. The fortress began collapsing around them. Maya shouted for everyone to run. They raced back to the Nightingale with the structure falling apart behind them. Christine got them out just as the entire fortress imploded. The shockwave nearly destroyed their ship, but they made it to safe distance. Behind them, the Harbinger's fortress was gone, reduced to scattered debris floating in space. All across the galaxy, void. Swarm ships stopped moving. The hybrid soldiers collapsed. The AI that had threatened organic life for eons was finally dead. The team celebrated, but Jake could only look at Elindra. She stood apart from the others. Her face was blank and her eyes distant. He walked over to her slowly. "Are you okay?" he asked. Elindra did not respond immediately. Then she turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "The bond," she whispered, "I cannot feel it anymore." It worked. We destroyed the connection. Jake felt his heart break. Even though they had known this would happen, it still hurt. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Do not," she said. "Please do not touch me. If you do, I will fall apart, and I need to be strong right now." The journey back to Ashara Prime was quiet. News of the victory spread quickly. The Sylvari fleet emerged from hiding. They made contact with the coalition for the first time in millennia. Elindra's people hailed her as a hero, but when they learned what she had sacrificed, there was silence. Soul bonds were sacred to the Sylvari. To destroy one was unthinkable. Yet she had done exactly that, to save both their peoples. The Sylvari Council declared that her exile was over. She was invited to return home with full honors. She would take her place as the next queen. Her sacrifice had proven that humanity could be trusted. The two species would form an alliance. Together they would rebuild what the Harbinger had destroyed. It was everything Elindra had hoped for, but Jake could see no joy in her eyes. The celebration at Ashara Prime was massive. Humans and Sylvari mingled together for the first time. Music played and speeches were made. Commander Harper presented Elindra with the highest military honors. The princess accepted them gracefully. She smiled and thanked everyone, but Jake could see through the mask. He found her later standing alone watching the sunset. Starfire was curled nearby, sleeping peacefully. Jake approached carefully. "You are leaving," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Elindra replied. "My people need me. I have responsibilities I can no longer avoid." Jake nodded, even though it felt like dying. "Then why do you look so sad?" he asked. "You won. Everything you fought for came true." Elindra turned to face him. In the fading light, she looked ethereal and heartbreakingly beautiful. "Because I lied again," she said. Her voice broke on the words. Jake felt confusion about what? About the bond, she whispered. About what would happen when we used it. Jake went very still. "What do you mean?" Elindra wrapped her arms around herself. "I told you the surge would destroy our connection," she said. "I told you we would lose the bond forever." But that was not entirely true. Jake waited, unable to breathe. "The truth is," Elindra continued, "soul bonds cannot be destroyed by magic or technology. They can only be denied. The surge did not break our connection. It made it stronger. I can feel you right now. Everything you are feeling. Your confusion and hope and fear. I feel it all as clearly as my own emotions." Then why Jake started, but she cut him off. "Because I thought I could lie my way through this," she said. "I thought if you believed the bond was gone, we could both move on. You could find happiness with your own kind, and I could return to my duties without this constant ache in my chest. But I cannot do it anymore. I cannot keep lying. I cannot keep pretending." Elindra stepped closer to him. Tears were streaming down her face, but she did not look away. "I cannot ignore my feelings anymore. Human," she said. Her voice trembled with emotion. "I love you, Jake Morrison. I love you with everything I am. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you more than my duty, more than my crown, more than my own life, and I hate that I love you because it makes everything so impossibly complicated." Jake stood frozen as she continued. "The bond chose you," she said. "My soul chose you, and I have tried so hard to fight it. I have tried to be strong and put duty first. But standing here knowing I have to leave, knowing I may never see you again, I cannot keep pretending anymore. The truth is that you have become the center of my world, and losing you will hurt far more than any weapon ever could." She took a shaky breath. "So there it is," she said. "The truth I have been avoiding. I love you, and I am terrified. I love you, and I do not know what to do about it. I love you, and it changes everything." Jake felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Everything he had been feeling, everything he had been afraid to acknowledge. It was all reflected back at him in her words. Without thinking, he closed the distance between them. He cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was warm, and her tears wet against his palms. "I love you too," he said. The words came easily now that they were finally spoken. "I have been falling for you since the beginning, and I do not care about complications. I do not care about duty or species differences. All I know is that losing you is not an option." Elindra let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "We cannot," she tried to say, but Jake kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative and questioning. But then Elindra kissed him back with desperate intensity. All the fear and love and longing poured into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Starfire raised its head and made a pleased, rumbling sound. The dragon had known all along. "So what do we do now?" Elindra whispered. Her forehead rested against his. Jake smiled. "We figure it out," he said. "Together. You are going to be queen, and I am just a human captain, but we will find a way, because what we have is worth fighting for." Elindra pulled back to look at him. "You would really try to make this work?" she asked. "Despite everything, despite the impossible distance and political complications, despite the fact that our peoples have only just started to trust each other. Jake nodded firmly. I once told you that humans are stubborn, he said. We do not give up on things that matter, and you matter more than anything. Alindra smiled then, a real genuine smile that transformed her whole face. It was radiant and filled with hope. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said. Probably both, Jake admitted, but I am willing to be both for you. Alindra laughed and kissed him again. Around them, the celebration continued. Humans and Silvari were building a new alliance, creating a future that would have seemed impossible just months ago. And at the center of it all stood a human captain and an alien princess, bound by a connection that defied logic, united by a love that transcended species and stars. The war was over, but their journey together was just beginning. Starfire spread its wings and roared at the sky. The dragons seemed to be celebrating, too. Jake and Alindra stood wrapped in each other's arms. The future was uncertain and filled with challenges, but they would face it together, and that was enough.